Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jackie Leiser. I'm a manager with the CAQH Core team. And I just want to thank you all for joining us for this afternoon's Core and X12 webinar. We've had several webinars with X12 this year, and we're excited to kick off a new segment of our series with them to discuss the 275 transaction and the healthcare claims attachments operating rules. Taking a look at our next slide, I'll just go through our agenda briefly. So first, we'll start with an X12 overview, and then X12 will go into a deeper dive on the electronic attachment standard. Core will then give a brief overview and talk a bit about the healthcare claims attachments operating rules that go hand in hand with that standard. And then we'll have some time at the end to answer any questions you have in the audience. We'll wrap things up after that with a brief call to action. Just some brief logistics on the next slide. If you'd like to download today's presentation, you can do so with the handout section on your GoToWebinar menu. We are aware that there is an issue with some users accessing that handout section, but don't worry, we will be sending out a copy of, we'll be sending out a link where you can download a copy of the slide as well as a recording of today's presentation in the next 1 to 2 business days. If you have a question for any of our speakers, you can submit your question at any time using that questions panel on your GoToWebinar menu. Please feel free to submit them throughout the presentation and we'll take the time at the end to ask them to our speakers. On this next slide, I'm going to let our speakers for today introduce themselves briefly, starting with you, Taha, if you want to kick things off.
Thanks, Jackie. So as Jackie mentioned, my name is Taha Andrawala. I'm an Associate Director at Core, been with the organization for 10 years, and I support our rule development efforts as well as their implementation efforts via our certification testing program. I'm glad to be able to talk to you today about attachments. Pass it over to Michelle.
Thanks, Taha. I'm Michelle Berry. I am with Ability, but in this particular role today, I am representing X12 and I'm the liaison between Core and X12 and Core. Mary Lynn?
Thanks, Michelle. I'm Mary Lynn Bushman, and I work for National Government Services, which is a Medicare fee-for-service contractor. And I am an Agile product manager in the EDI area. I've been very active in X12 and HL7, and I'll turn it back over to Jackie, I believe.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to let Taha kick things off on the next slide and just level set us for what attachments are and what the state of the industry looks like.
Sure thing. Thanks, Jackie. So to kind of start off and begin, in the world of healthcare claims, I want you to imagine where mountains of paperwork are potentially replaced by, a digital exchange. This vision is progressing as adoption of fully electronic claim attachments increases over time. And the term claim attachments, as you will hear throughout the presentation today, refers to the exchange of patient-specific medical information or supplemental documentation to support a healthcare claim submission. And looking at the chart on the right-hand side of the screen, the CAQH index, the 2022 report, which is an annual industry report that tracks adoption of electronic transactions, paints a picture of an evolving landscape. It reveals a slight rise in the use of electronic claim attachments with a 2% increase across the medical industry, going from 2020 to 2022, although lagging behind other electronic transactions such as claims and eligibility, which is very, very high volumes and very high adoption. Wanted to point out the small increase represents a move towards a more paperless future as adoption grows, especially for a transaction that is yet to be mandated. And then looking at the dental industry, it appears that they are taking the lead, showcasing a growth of 15% adoption in fully electronic claim attachments during that same time period between 2020 and 2022. And looking at this embrace of automation by the dental sector, it indicates a readiness from the industry overall to move towards a more streamlined and efficient approach towards claim processing. These statistics paint more than just numbers. They actually demonstrate a growing awareness and appreciation for the benefits of electronic claim attachments. And from eliminating paper clutter to reducing errors and delays, automation and claims processing, and moving towards electronic attachment workflows is paving the way for more of an efficient and cost-effective healthcare system for everyone today. And today we're going to walk through some of the transaction standards and operating rules that really serve as a foundation for supporting electronic claim attachments. And with that, I'll pass it over to Michelle to kind of walk us through the standard process at X12.
Thank you, Taha. The next slide is really just an intro around electronic attachments. If we could go to the next slide, we're going to start kicking off some information. But before we do that, I know we're all anxious to really get into talking about electronic attachments, claim attachments, and really looking forward to asking questions at the end of this session or before the end of the session. So again, this is an interactive opportunity. If you have any questions during the session, I believe we've got the chat feature available for folks to enter questions throughout the session. But a couple of things to kick us off. From an X12 perspective, yes, I do have to share this information. It is a disclaimer from our attorneys, and just want to keep it brief. This presentation is really informational purposes only, and that's what it serves. It serves as this point in time in our communication, education, outreach, and informing the industry. Keep in mind, it doesn't represent any specific legal advice and does contain a point in time of content. So if you think about this content continuing to grow, continuing to change our healthcare system, this particular set of information is going to share that at a specific level. Again, we're going to have multiple series with our partners at CORE around electronic attachments, focusing on that claim aspect. Next slide really talks about what's our agenda. We're going to talk about X12 a little bit further before we get into the meat and the potatoes, as some folks would say. Talking about electronic attachments, Mary Lynn is really going to walk us through the purpose and scope, the benefits, the users, and the workflow. And then she's going to kind of pass it back to me. We're going to wrap it up from an X12 perspective, and then we're going to further define how the operating rules really complement what we've got into production today. Next slide about background. And yes, we're getting into those additional slides that we want to share with you, especially those of you who are very new. If we could go to the next slide. Talking about who is X12? What are we? What is our purpose? And how do we function in the healthcare technology marketplace? So if you think about our organization as a consensus-based organization, ANZ-specific organization, we're accredited around those national standards developer and otherwise known as ASD. I'm sure some folks have heard that term utilized in the industry. We focus on the development of standards. We look at across all industries, and insurance, healthcare insurance is one of those sectors. We keep in mind that we do have ongoing cross-industry interoperable data exchange. And again, this is giving us a level of information that we can exchange from across all industries. Also keeping in mind our standards have been true and tried, proven reliable, efficient, and effective in supporting organizations like health plans, payers, vendors, clearinghouses, and even additional organizations like public health to better understand how data is exchanged and how we can collectively exchange data. We've been doing this, believe it or not, over 40 years. So you can imagine the true and tried history about X12 and about how proven the standards have been. Interoperability has been a part of that for over 40 years. We also maintain electronic messaging. This helps support our financial, our government, healthcare, insurance, supply chain, transportation, and other industries that work really closely with us as an organization. Next slide. This complements what we just got through discussing and wanted just to add just a couple more pieces around X12. Lastly, if you think about X12 as an organization, an entity, we're comprised of a handful of staff. Yes, a handful of staff, but hundreds of members and thousands of member representatives, volunteers, experts, subject matter experts, like Mary Lynn. She is fantastic when it comes to talking about electronic attachments. So you're going to hear more from her in just a minute. Also, our membership includes organizations, associations, corporations, government entities, and humans, individuals that contribute. Our standards are really the workhorse around the standards organization from a B2B, a business to business exchange. But also keep in mind, from a partner to partner standards perspective, as we continue to develop the X12 IP, intellectual property. So keep that in mind as we continue to go through the presentation. Next slide. If you think about the base of our implementation or implementation guides, billions of transactions. Hear me when I say the B word. Billion of transactions are utilized daily across various entities and organizations and industries, like, as I shared earlier, finance, government, healthcare, etc. We also have millions of entities around the world that have established the infrastructure to support X12 standards, X12 transactions, and representing a significant, hear me, significant investment in a stable, true and tried infrastructure. Again, want to make sure that we all understand it's not just EDI, right? We also have JSON, XML. We have those capabilities within our base standard for our transactions. Also keeping in mind, our transactions are well defined with level of expertise across all of healthcare. And again, I'm focusing on the healthcare aspect right now. And representation from these subject matter experts, again, with systems that have been in production for over 40 years, utilizing the significant sound-based infrastructure implementation guides. Next slide talks about our organizational structure. If you think about every organization, you have a board of directors. So again, from an organization perspective, we have a board of directors. We also have X12 members, representatives, volunteers. We also have the ASC steering committee. And as you can see, all of the X12 organization or industries within the ASC steering committee. As I shared before, finance, logistics, government, healthcare. And then you've got that governance panel that sits in between the ASC steering and the RSC council. So again, just wanted to give you a very high level overview of the organizational structure. Next slide. Finalizing our organization, and I don't think it's the least important, it's super important to understand that infrastructure, who we are, infrastructure, the outlaying of the organization, but keeping in mind, most importantly, from a healthcare industry or a healthcare marketplace, we are really focused around the Accredited Standards Committee, that ASC, that slide that I just showed over on the right-hand side, the left-hand side. That provides us with a wealth of structure, individuals that are really sitting in, as some folks would say, leaning into the discussion and making change a part of everything that we do at our organization. Some healthcare individuals or organizations aren't really familiar with X12, and they're not familiar with our committees. But if you have any questions, I'll lead you to the right location at x12.org so that you can take a look and see how organizationally structured we are. And then x12.org does have quite a bit of additional information that I'll share as well. The next slide talks about our products and the types of services and products that we do provide in the industries. A couple of them I think are extremely important is our X12 product library is so rich, and it contains not just EDI standard information, but as I stated, from an XML, JSON perspective, we've also got technical reports. We've got type 2s and type 3s. We really complement the implementation guides with those technical reports. And again, we also have external code list, and I know a majority of this team is very aware, and the attendees today are very aware of what we refer to as external code list. Keeping in mind also, we've got schema-based type of implementation guides, and we also have other offerings. So again, from an implementer perspective, if there's any questions you have, again, take a look at x12.org. That will provide you with quite a bit of wealth and enriched information. The next slide gets us into X12's approach. We're always open-minded. We're always looking for opportunities to advance our vision and drive that vision into what we produce and how we produce it. We also keep an insight and a pulse, if you will, on where the industry is going around data exchange. So keep in mind, we're looking at what is current in the industry and what is those different types of developing technologies, and how do we play a role in keeping our implementation guides very current and very enriched with the most recent current change of an act or a law. We, again, our pulse is down. We're interactive in the healthcare industry around responding to different types of requests. And again, also looking at what we stated before, future business requirements and current business requirements. Organizations may come to a work group meeting or a task group meeting with suggestions and what a state, local government has provided. So again, keeping that in mind, we're always looking at opportunities. We're vision focused, and we drive that vision into what we produce. We're also very passionate, as you could probably tell in my voice, and very enthusiastic about what we do and how we do it, and how we include the industry in everything that we do. So again, that is something that is super important, and just want to say, looking forward to hearing more from Mary Lynn here in just a second, but just want to say thank you for your time and dedication, and keep your ears and eyes open for our next series. But Mary Lynn, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to give you just a high-level overview of the electronic attachment transactions. Next slide, please. So the purpose and scope of the 275, is just like any of the other transactions and implementation guides. It provides standardized data requirements and the content, right, that focuses on sending additional documentation to support the adjudication or processing of a claim and to support a prior authorization request. There's two different 275 implementation guides that are available. There's one for the claim and one for prior. The 275 implementation guide for the claim is the additional information to support a healthcare claim or encounter. And the one for prior auth is additional information to support a healthcare services review. Next slide, please. So there's many, many benefits of using electronic attachments, just like with other electronic transactions. So some of the benefits are, it does provide that vehicle for providers to submit the additional documentation that supports the claim or supports the prior authorization request. It's going to save the providers and the payers on all of the paper process, the mailing, the postage costs, the time it takes your staff to pull all that together and send it. Also, it's going to save money on mailroom costs. That's probably more on the payer side, but it definitely saves lots of money on the mailroom costs. It's going to streamline the process, make it more efficient. You'll be able to send the information in a consistent manner so providers can send the same transaction to all the different payers, right? So it makes it very consistent, very efficient. It's going to save on appeal costs. We all know that appeal process is very lengthy, takes a long time to go through it, and costs a lot of money. So when the documentation is being sent with the claim or with the prior authorization request, it helps cut down on those appeals that the provider needs to request. And there's a faster turnaround time. We all know that, right? The paper process, the manual process takes a lot longer than the electronic process. We are hearing that providers are being paid up to 30 days sooner. One of the other advantages with that is they're receiving acknowledgments. When they send paper in, they don't get an acknowledgement from saying, hey, I got your documentation, just so you know. They don't get anything. So they don't have any idea when we received it or even if we did receive it. Next slide, please. Now, the users of these transactions are the covered entities, basically. So, all of the providers, the health plans, clearinghouses, billing services, property and casualty, and vendors. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about the two different workflows with electronic attachments. The first one is the unsolicited workflow. So this is when the provider knows upfront, based on past billing history, based on payer policy that's on their website, that the claim or the prior auth request requires additional documentation in order to process the claim or respond to that prior auth request. So the provider will submit the claim or the prior auth request and send that documentation at the same time using the 275 transaction. The attachment control number is the value that's used to match that 275 to the claim or to the prior auth request. So that value has to be reported in the corresponding claim as well as in the 275. It needs to be the same value so they can match it. Same thing with prior authorization. There's a field in the 278 transaction for that value, and then they send the same value in the 275 so the payer can match up. And then once the payer receives that information, they can go ahead and process your claim, hopefully for payment, and can process the prior authorization request and get the your UTN number out to you. Next slide, please. The other workflow for electronic attachments is the solicited workflow. So this one's a little bit different. This is when the provider will submit the claim or the prior authorization request to the payer, and the payer decides, oh, I need additional information in order to process this, right? I don't have enough information to adjudicate or to approve this prior authorization request. So the payer has to request that information. From the claim perspective, the payer will request the information by using the X12-277 request for additional information. And for prior authorization, they will use the X12-278. So they've used the 278 to submit the prior auth request, but then the payer turns around and uses the same transaction to go back and request the documentation that's required. Then the provider will gather all this information up and they send it back using the appropriate X12-275. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, two different 275. The structure's just a little bit different. So if they're sending the documentation to support the claim, they'll use the 275 to support the additional information to support the claim. And if they're doing it for the 278, it's the healthcare services review. Then when the payer receives X275s, they're able to, again, process the claim and process the prior authorization request. And I think now, next slide, please, I'll turn it back over to Michelle to wrap us up from an X12 perspective.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I know we've got folks just ready to ask some questions. If the questions haven't started coming in yet, I'm sure they will. So I will be brief on the wrap up. Next slide, let's talk about keeping some information at your fingertips. One, we want to remind you that, again, you can come out to x12.org, take a look at our information, specifically once you sign in, once you sign in to x12.org, pull it up, go into Information Center. You will be able to see documentation. You will be able to see a enriched library of information, PowerPoint presentations, position papers or briefs, checklists, and other documentation. I highly recommend, if you have not gone to x12.org, please go out there and look in our information center as to the wealth of information that you have at your fingertips. And you can take a look at everything that is documented. I steer folks there for a couple of reasons, because we do have a lot of questions about X12 sometimes after our educational sessions with our partners at CORE. So we want to make sure everyone on the call has an opportunity to go out to x12.org and take a look at the information. Again, we have documentation that talks about an overview of X12N subcommittees, task groups, work groups, and even in a little bit more in depth around the X12 individual work groups. So as Mary Lynn had stated, electronic attachments, they have a work group specifically around attachments. So if you're interested in even joining a work group, highly recommend going to x12.org. Additionally, if you go to the next slide, I want to make sure that everybody understands how to stay connected with us from a social media perspective. Outside of going to x12.org and learning all you can, become a member if you're interested in doing so. Again, this is your choice, your decision. We would love to have you as a participating member, subject matter expert, and whatever work group, task group you're interested in participating in. Also, keep in mind from a social media perspective, we are on X, formerly known as Twitter. We are also on and in LinkedIn. So if you're interested in social media, chatting with us and looking at upcoming events, etc., you can join us through social media or go to x12.org/meetings, and that will give you a perspective of where we're going to be and when we're going to be there. Next slide. This is our last one. We love feedback. Any ideas, suggestions, opportunities, and questions, feel free to reach out to us at x12.org/feedback. And again, please let us know who you are so that we can reach back out to you with a response. But if you do have any questions, ideas, suggestions, questions, comments, we would love to hear from you. And that is it for X12. I'm going to turn it over to our partners at CAQH Core. Taha.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks for an insightful presentation on X12 and kind of the work efforts undergoing by the standard development organization on claim attachments. So next, I'll kind of walk us through CORE and our work on supporting and building off that standard via operating rules and how the both standards and operating rules can work together to facilitate better automation and support organizations with implementation of electronic claim attachments. So on the next slide, before I kind of dive into the meat of the attachment operating rules itself, I just wanted to provide some context and overview of CORE. And as an introduction, at CORE, our mission is to drive the creation and adoption of operating rules that really act as building blocks of a more efficient and effective healthcare exchange. And our mission is achieved through the integrated model shown below. And first, we identify needs. We work closely with stakeholders across the industry to understand their needs and challenges. We then convene those stakeholders together to bring together diverse voices, including providers, payers, government agencies, to really collaborate and discuss solutions. The third step is to then develop and test operating rules through our iterative rule development process, ensuring that our final product is effective and user-friendly to support uniform implementations. The next stage is to deploy. We then engage stakeholders to then implement those operating rules across the industry. And finally, the last two steps shown are really to promote the adoption of operating rules through various components such as education, outreach, and measuring the impact the rules have on the industry to understand what the return on investment and value add are, to then repeat the process again in efforts of maintaining the rules over time. CORE's vision extends beyond just hoping for efficiency. We seek to be a trusted facilitator, fostering a healthcare data exchange that is not only simple and sustainable across all stakeholders, but also constantly evolving to anticipate market needs. On the next slide, I wanted to highlight that CORE is federally designated by the Department of Health and Human Services as a national operating rule author for administrative transactions. As such, we are dedicated to developing consensus-based business rules that drive interoperability in healthcare. And our work is pivotal in ensuring that all stakeholders in the healthcare system operate under the same rules and definitions to make sure it's even across all players. And this harmonization makes data exchange and communication between providers, payers, and consumers much more seamless. At CORE, we prioritize technology and standard agnostic approaches in our rule development processes, ensuring that that rules are applicable across diverse systems and technologies. And this inclusivity removes unnecessary barriers to adoption and improves and fosters industry-wide participation. Looking at our board, we are governed by a multi-stakeholder board comprised of health plans, providers, vendors, government entities, and standard development organization advisors. This ensures a comprehensive perspective throughout the rule development process, from overarching strategy to goals to the technical writing. And each of these stakeholders bring their unique expertise and insights to the table, leading to well-rounded and practical solutions. CORE further enriches our rule development process by collaborating with standard development organizations, and these organizations act as advisors not only to the board, but also through our education and outreach efforts to really provide valuable technical expertise in ensuring that our rules are grounded in practical realities set by the standards. And as you've heard today, we're excited to collaborate with our partners at X12 to talk about attachments today and continue our series in the future as well. Moving to the next slide. This slide highlights the diverse membership of organizations that participate and engage in our rule development activities at CORE. This list includes providers, health plans, vendors, associations, and government agencies, and that diversity ensures that CORE rules are designed to meet the needs of all stakeholders, large and small. On the next slide, I wanted to kind of dive in deep to make sure that everyone has a baseline understanding of what operating rules are and that kind of what they mean and how they potentially maybe relate to some of the standards work. And so operating rules are defined under the Affordable Care Act as the necessary business rules and guidelines for the electronic exchange of information that are not specified by a standard or implementation specifications. These rules are essentially guidelines and protocols that govern the flow of electronic information, where standards are potentially absent or silent or could use further guidance. So imagine, potentially you're baking a cake. Think of standards as the ingredient list and measurements specifying what's needed and the quantity for a desired outcome. And operating rules are the contextual instructions in a recipe guiding each step to ensure success. Both are crucial. Standards define what standards define the method, and rules show how. And together they really orchestrate a delicious product that has the same quality each time you use them. So ensuring the scalability and consistency across, as you scale up. And these rules are not unique to healthcare. They're a cornerstone in many industries, including financial services, transportation, and retail. Facilitating seamless, predictable, and standardized transactions across billions of transactions that may occur daily throughout the entire verticals of industries. And within healthcare, some of our operating rules are federally mandated, while others are voluntary. So in summary, think of operating rules as rules to support revenue cycle automation and really to help promote interoperability by establishing common expectations for electronic data exchange. And this really allows providers and payers to automate communications to enhance efficiencies in data exchange across trading partners. On the next slide, I kind of wanted to highlight that the core operating rules and many published to date, are instrumental in streamlining key functions of the revenue cycle. And we publish rules that touch across the full spectrum from, your patient encounter, from eligibility and benefit verification, all the way down to payment and remittance for claim payment, and then even extending into some of the member enrollment space of having operating rules to help support and streamline some of those data exchanges. But for today's discussion, I'd like to specifically concentrate on the healthcare claim component and dive into, what are some of the operating rules that we publish to help support the exchange of claim attachments. So on the next slide, so today I'll be talking about two operating rules that we published, one on the healthcare claims infrastructure rule, and the other one on the healthcare claims attachments data content rule. So moving into the next slide, I'll focus the conversation around our infrastructure rule topics. But I wanted to then dive into what are some of the nuances and differences between infrastructure rules and data content rules to make sure that that we all have a common set of expectations. So traditionally, there are two types of operating rules that we publish. One are infrastructure rules, and the other is data content. So imagine a vast network of roads connecting businesses across the nation. Each road adheres to certain rules, ensuring smooth and efficient transportation of those goods. And similarly, in the complex world of healthcare data exchange, we require a solid foundation of rules to ensure the seamless and accurate information flow, which is why we have both infrastructure and data content operating rules. So think of those infrastructure rules as potentially, the asphalt and maybe guardrails of a highway. They establish universal expectations for how systems work, regardless of the type of vehicles or data that's being transported on those roads. These rules really allow us to track response times across trading partners, ensuring consistency and accountability, and they provide a stable and predictable environment for connectivity and security of data exchange, promoting efficiency and adaptability to future changes. But those smooth highways isn't alone enough. We need that valuable cargo on board to transport those goods, and that's where data content operating rules come in. Think of data content rules as carefully packed shipping containers filled with different information needs that manage specific processes. And by leveraging and those rules leverage existing standards where possible. So those rules really promote interoperability, scalability, and enabling seamless exchange across systems. So just like a highway system, that requires constant care and improvement, our operating rules are not static. We require communication and collaboration among the stakeholders that participate in the data exchange to support ongoing development and to assess overall effectiveness. And so we have regular feedback mechanisms and regular reviews to ensure the rules remain adaptable and relevant over time as the healthcare data exchange landscape embraces new technology, innovation occurs, so that way we can pave the way for a future-proof tomorrow. So on the next slide, painting the picture of both infrastructure and data content rules, I'm going to now focus in on the healthcare claims attachment infrastructure rules and kind of talk through some of the different requirements that support both X12 methods of exchange using the 275 transaction and also non-X12 methods. So our core attachment claim infrastructure rules really establish a set of guidelines that streamline and standardize the way attachments are exchanged between providers and health plans. These guidelines are standard agnostic and apply to both the non-X12 and X12 methods as indicated on the slide. And the rules really ensure continuous information exchange by requiring minimum weekly system availability of 90% for health plans. So this commitment to an increased uptime, coupled with options for additional quarterly downtime of 24 hours, really helps support larger upgrades and minimizes disruption and guarantees provider access to reliable systems when sending claim or claim attachment inquiries. For seamless communication across those different systems, our operating rules mandate support for the most current core connectivity standard, presently version 4.0, and this ensures consistent, reliable, and secure platform for data exchange using modern technology and architecture approaches such as RESTful APIs and use of authorization tokens. Next, looking at file size, our rules address the issue of file size. So, sometimes systems need to be equipped to handle attachments at a minimum of 64 megabits or higher. So ensuring that even with the most complex claims with multiple attachments, those can be processed without any hiccups, and providers won't be limited to file size restrictions. So ensuring that the delivery of the claim attachment itself can be accepted. Specifically for healthcare claims, the rules emphasize transparency by requiring health plans to provide readily accessible information detailing the type of data that may be needed to support a claim adjudication request. So this really empowers providers to submit and complete accurate claims, reducing errors and delays by having, what are some of those documentation requirements or policy requirements of the attachment type needed prior, so that way a provider can send that with a claim without having to alleviate the back and forth with a health plan. Next, by mandating support for batch and real-time processing modes, our operating rules empower providers to really choose an option that best suits their needs and workflows. So this flexibility ensures that claims can be submitted and processed efficiently regardless of their complexity. Looking at batch processing mode, health plans are required to provide a response within 2 business days and acknowledging the receipt of that claim attachment. So ensuring that providers receive feedback on their claims in a timely manner, so allowing them to address any issues quickly and efficiently. Looking at real-time processing, the response time, this response time requires health plans to provide an acknowledgement response within 20 seconds or less, ensuring that providers get real-time feedback that that claim attachment was received, and potentially identifying any potential errors or thinking through ways to expedite that claim resolution process. Looking at the next area around companion guide, so clear communication is crucial to resolving issues. So we want to make sure that as organizations go out and build out specifications for implementation of the X12 transactions, that they are adhering to a format and structure in their companion guide documents to ensure that no matter the plan, there's consistency across the different companion guides to reduce confusion and promote a standardized approach to data exchange, really enhancing efficiency across the entire process. So with that concludes kind of an overview of the infrastructure rules for the core claim attachment rules. And then on the next slide, I'll kind of dive into some of the data content components that are addressed in the rule. So in addressing the core attachment healthcare claims data content rule, we focused on streamlining the process for reassociation for additional information in healthcare claims. So we saw this as a big challenge area and wanted to make sure that we identified the different pieces and elements to ensure that a claim can be properly matched, or a claim attachment can be properly matched and linked to the corresponding claim. And through our rule development efforts, we found that manual reassociation was a really time-consuming and error-prone process, particularly when attachments were sent without solicitation. So Marilyn walked through that unsolicited attachment workflow, so kind of focusing on that. And matching those documents to a corresponding claim was definitely a burdensome task, often leading to delays in claim processing. So when we did our rule development, we focused our core attachment data content rules to really align on the reassociation requirements to really introduce clear and standardized requirements for both providers and health plans. And looking at kind of starting off with the non-X12 method and kind of how we develop reassociation rules to support that, think of this as attaching a file to an email. Providers needed to indicate that they're sending additional information electronically, and if they wanted to do that without an X12 275 transaction, they could do this by using digital envelopes via SOAP connectivity or REST connectivity via the headers and the specifications. So think of this digital envelope as holding crucial information about the attached documents and serving as 2 vital functions. So the first kind of area is kind of alerting a health plan of an incoming document by specifying the attached format. So within the headers of a SOAP message or RESTful API, you could indicate the type of format attachments being sent, such as a HL7 CCDA or PDF file, image file. So that way, that attachment, by alerting a health plan, that a file is incoming, the health plan can then ensure that documents could be matched to the corresponding claim. And to further streamline kind of that non-X12 pathway, providers, are also encouraged via the rules to include specific labels within that digital envelope. So those labels, called data elements, really contain the contents and purposes of the document to really enhance further clarity and streamline workflows. So this inclusion of additional reassociation data really ensures a smoother and more efficient document handling process, benefiting all parties. And examples of these types of reference data that I'm referring to include items such as claim number, member ID, date of birth, or date of service. So by having those additional levels of specificity can really help support matching a claim and a claim attachment together via that non-X12 approach. And kind of shifting to the X12 method by leveraging the 275 standard, this method really helps establish clear and consistent communication channels, really ensuring that there's a seamless information flow between all stakeholders. And kind of with that, we built rule requirements to require providers to use the code EL on a claim submission, really acting and serving as a digital flag that signals the health plan of an incoming electronic attachment. Looking at this simple yet effective approach ensures the health plan is prepared to receive and acknowledge that attachment is incoming to process that document promptly. However, that X12 method goes beyond just that notification. It also encourages a provider to incorporate metadata, data that provides additional context and clarity, and clarifies that purpose of attachment. So these details, act as informative roadmaps, empowering health plans to efficiently, match that incoming attachment payload to the appropriate member and corresponding claim. Like the data I mentioned in the non-X12 method, examples of this metadata includes claim number, member ID, date of birth, date of service, and so on. And further, looking at the X12 method, this method also empowers health plans to take, that active role in the information exchange process. So when requesting additional information electronically, kind of going via the solicited model that Marilyn walked through, they must use the same EL code, maintaining consistency and familiarity within the system. So additionally, health plans are also recommended to send appropriate LOINC codes, which are unique identifiers that specify the exact document needed for each claim, such as an evaluation or care plan, so the provider knows the precise information that they need to provide in that attachment, so to eliminate that sort of ambiguity and ensuring both parties are aligned in their understanding of what the required information is. So, the structured approach via both data, content, and rules really helps pave the way for a more streamlined claim processing, leading to faster reimbursements, improved financial outcomes, and ultimately to really enhance patient care. So with that, I think that concludes an overview of both the core attachment rules that really build and support the X12 275 transaction. And then I'm going to hand it over to Jackie to kind of lead us into, I believe, questions.
Great, thanks, Taha. So I saw a few questions come in throughout the presentation, and some of them actually overlapped with some of the questions you all submitted during registration, which is great. The first question I'm going to ask is about the federal mandate process for the standard and these operating rules. Could you share if there has been any progress in having these federally mandated to help encourage adoption of the 275?
I can take this one, Jackie. So in regards to the federal mandate, the Department of Health and Human Services published, the latest news that I have is they published a notice of proposed rulemaking around the adoption of standards, the X12 275 being the one of the attachment standards mentioned in that rule, to really support and drive industry towards a common framework towards attachment. So on the policy making front, as far as mandate, there is a notice of proposed rulemaking out. We haven't heard an update regarding, what are some of the next steps involved in that. And then along with operating rules, CORE's proposed CORE's attachment operating rules, we worked with the National Committee of Vital Health Statistics and to put forward a recommendation around, what adoption may look like. And due to the timing and delivery of that notice proposed rulemaking, we are working in collaboration with our partners to understand, once that standard is named, what the operating rules may look like after the fact. So more to come on that, and good question.
Great, thanks, Taha. This next question is for Mary Lynn. What transaction is used for a payer to acknowledge that they've received a solicited claim attachment?
Thanks. So the acknowledgments that are used, of course, is the X12N acknowledgement. That's used for the transaction. However, the 999 does not have the ability to validate the HL7 information if you have HL7 information in that BDS segment in the 275. So the 824 transaction is another transaction that's for application acknowledgement, and they have included several notes and error codes that will acknowledge the HL7 portion of the 275. Just to expand a little bit, with the 275, it's an X12 transaction, and there's an embedded health level 7 standard within the 275. So that's in a binary segment, which the binary segment is the BDS segment. And that's actually where that clinical data or that documentation goes. It goes in there. So we needed the ability to be able to acknowledge that information if anything was wrong with it. So the 824 transaction will provide that level of acknowledgement.
Great, thanks, Mary Lynn. Another question for you. Have there been any discussions about the 60/20 or 70/30 versions?
Well, as Taha mentioned about the notice of proposed rulemaking, the version that was named in there for the 275 was the 60/20 version. Again, we don't have any notice from CMS on what will be in the final rule, whether or not it would be 60/20 or 70/30. So, but the notice of proposed rulemaking did name the 60/20 version. And there are several payers and clearinghouses that have the 60/20 version of the 275 in production.
Okay, great. Another question that came in, and Taha, this one's for you, and you may have covered this earlier, but someone just wanted to clarify if the attachment operating rules support using FHIR instead of X12 for prior authorization attachments.
Sure. Good question. And as I kind of highlighted earlier, our claim attachment rules and kind of the CORE's framework for developing rules, it's kind of meant to hopefully be standard agnostic in a sense that we both have defined ways to support attachment sent both for claims and prior authorization via non-X12 payloads or methods, and then via X12 pathways. So in short, yes, our attachment rules do support the use of can send FHIR transactions within the context of our rules via our core connectivity, and our updated core connectivity rules really supports that RESTful API exchange, which kind of FHIR is architected towards. So the simple answer is yes.
Great, thanks, Taha. And then last question, any thoughts in lieu of the federal mandate on how we can increase adoption of the 275 across industry?
I can take this one, Jackie. So there are several payers who have 275 transaction, as well as several clearinghouses, like I mentioned a few minutes ago. And I really think spreading the word on the benefits is the best way to increase the usage of it. There are so many values. Here at NGS, we have the process implemented. We've been in production for about 10 years now, and we do have just about 2,000 providers, provider organizations that are sending attachments to us every day, using the 275 with the embedded HL7. Those providers, as we reach out to them, they constantly are telling us the value that they're seeing, because the biggest thing is they are getting paid so much faster. So we've done some, detailed, research on some reports and analysis and stuff. And what we found, now again, this is Medicare fee for service, right? So looking at the claims that required the additional documentation, the dollar amount for these claims is anywhere between $3,000 and $4,000 approximately, right? So if a provider submits 100 claims a month and the claims are about $4,000, right, and they can get paid up to 30 days sooner, that's a big value for our providers. So I know whenever we do webinars and we go through, our program and explain what it can do, we have providers going to their clearinghouses right away saying that they want to be involved in this. So I think that that's a good way of increasing the usage.
Great, thank you so much. To wrap things up quickly, and if you had questions that just came in that we didn't get to, we'll answer them offline. But I do want to wrap things up now that we're at time with a quick call to action. Taking a look at the next slide, just a reminder, you can always email us at core@caqh.org if you'd like to get involved with any of the operating rule initiatives, or if you'd like to become core certified, please feel free to reach out. Our team is constantly monitoring that inbox. And also just a reminder, you can work with core on pilot and ROI studies and just kind of being an advocate for the benefits of these operating rules. So if you're interested in any of these 3 initiatives, please feel free to reach out to us. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, and hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.